Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or evening to those of you in a different time zone, and a warm welcome to you all. My name is Elaine Marie Bassett, and I'm the Business Manager at BIC. Thank you for attending this, our first ever Big Brunch session, which will focus on keeping your metadata up to date. We'll be tweeting about this event using the hashtag Big Brunch, so feel free to join in. On the screen now, you'll see the agenda for this session, and you'll note that we have 3 speakers lined up for you, including Cecilia Rushton from Hachette UK, Graham Bell from EDItEUR, and Clive Herbert from Nielsen Book. You'll also note that there is a dedicated 10-minute time slot allocated at the end of this event for questions. Before we kick off the event, I do have a little housekeeping. Whilst this is an informal online session and asking questions is therefore actively encouraged, we've taken the liberty of muting you all to ensure that the sound quality for this event is the best that it can be. This is especially important because this event, as you all know, is being recorded. If you have a question to ask our speakers during the dedicated Q&A session, you will either need to type your question in the chat box provided or will need to unmute yourself in order to speak. Please do let us know your name and the organisation for which you work prior to asking your question. If you would then be so kind as to remute yourself once you've asked your question, we would appreciate it. For those of you who are not speaking and do not have a question to put to our speakers, please do remain muted throughout the event. Thank you in advance for your help with this. This event is brought to you live by Book Industry Communication Limited. So who are we? For those of you who don't know already, BIC is a UK-based, not-for-profit members organisation at the heart of the book industry, creating standards, best practices and resources that form part of the DNA of your supply chains, helping your organisation to become more efficient, save money, become less wasteful and ultimately become greener. At the cornerstone of the book industry, we hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international industry-wide collaboration to reach agreement on dependable standards and best practice in the supply chain. We have 4 committees in place which work within their respective areas of the book industry supply chain, including the physical supply chain, the digital supply chain, metadata, the library sector. Our committees are run by volunteer representatives from BIC member organisations and help to determine and drive the work that we do at BIC for and on behalf of the industry. We also have a number of projects and review groups which are overseen by these committees. Events are keys to BIC's reach within the book industry, and we host a number throughout each year, including our BIC Breakfast or BIC Brunch sessions, various networking events, and our annual seminar at London Book Fair. Our industry recognised training is also at the heart of BIC's activities, as we strongly believe that successful businesses start with people. We welcome your engagement and are on all the usual social media platforms, so do get involved in any way that you can. So what is a BIC Brunch? Our BIC Brunch sessions are a brand new series of short online events that focus on a particular supply chain topic or issue. They're set up with you in mind, so please do make the most of this event by asking any questions that you might have. As I mentioned earlier, whilst we welcome questions at any point throughout this event, please be aware that there is a dedicated Q&A session scheduled for the end of this webinar. In June 2020 and every 2 months or so thereafter, we will be holding a series of green BIC Brunch sessions, which will focus on the steps being taken by the book industry to make our supply chain as environmentally friendly as possible. Further information about all of our forthcoming BIC Brunch and BIC Breakfast sessions can be found on our website via the addresses shown on your screen. I'll now pass you over to our first speaker for this event, Cecilia Rushton, Head of Editorial Operations at Hodder & Stoughton, the Headline Publishing Group, John Murray and Quercus Editions. Just as a reminder, Cecilia, you might need to unmute yourself actively.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Elena Marie, for the introduction. As Elena Marie said, I work in editorial operations across a number of divisions at Hachette, and over the last few years, I've worked with several of them to improve their metadata. That includes some companies and imprints that Hachette have acquired, where there's sometimes been a bit of work to tidy up their data. All those divisions now have BIC's top award for data excellence, and I'm going to talk to you today about how we manage metadata and how we use the BIC PDEA scheme to help us to do that. So what are we going to cover? Firstly, we'll talk about why metadata matters, although I'm guessing that the fact that you're all at this Big Brunch indicates that you are completely aware of that and understand that. We're going to talk about how the PDEA scheme helps us with metadata and supports us, but also what publishers should be doing internally to ensure great data too. The PDEA scheme is a great support, but it shouldn't be the only thing that publishers are doing. And finally, I'll touch on the refreshed PDEA scheme, which is now open for application. So why does good metadata matter? All publishing companies, quite rightly, have become a bit obsessed with metadata. And why is that? It's because it does two key things. It helps retailers to sell our products, and it helps customers to find them. The better the data, the more complete, accurate, and timely, the more information we provide to retailers, and the easier it is for customers to find our products. There are two levels of data: basic elements and descriptive rich data elements. So basic data elements, as you expect, include things like ISBN, title, author, sales rights, format, coding. Accurate basic data elements may not be very exciting, but they're crucial in getting the right info into the market. Excluding a territory in your data could mean hundreds of lost sales, potentially thousands. And adding the wrong category code can mean that your book is lost in a bookshop or on a website. According to Nielsen's 2016 white paper, titles that include all basic data elements sell 75% more copies than those that don't. And perhaps the most crucial bit of data is the cover image. Adding a cover image increases sales by more than 200%. So what about descriptive data? This, as you would expect, includes things like description, reviews, biography, and keywords. Including description, reviews, and biography, for example, increase sales by 72%, and including keywords increases sales by 34%. Descriptive elements are also particularly important for fiction titles. So why does it have to be kept up to date? As we all know, books are not static products. They are reissued, retitled, rejected. They are put into new formats, they are published in new markets and in new territories. So as well as getting basic data elements accurate and complete, the most dynamic data, description, categories, and keywords, will help you to reach the market in an even better way. These things should be checked and updated to keep them fresh and relevant. So why does it have to be ready early? The earlier the data is ready and feeding into the market, the better. Suppliers and retailers know about your product in plenty of time to order. Customers can pre-order titles, which builds buzz. And publishers have time to check and change elements that are not working. Increasingly, publishers are testing the water with their products and making changes after data is fed out, tweaking a subtitle, for example, or amending the keywords. Titles with a complete data set that feed into the market 4 or more months before pub sell 25% more copies. So there are 3 different things to consider here: basic data and getting it right and accurate, descriptive data to enhance and enrich your products, and feeding all those things out early. So why does it matter now? I think it's worth talking about why this particularly matters now. I'm sure some of you have signed up today because metadata is so crucial at the moment. Hachette, like many other publishers, is really focusing on data backlist and frontlist, particularly trusted brands and in genres that are popular now. If you're not reaching your customers online, you're not reaching them at all. And more than ever, digital presence is crucial, and getting to the top of the digital space can't be done without great data. Nielsen's new paper, The Impact of COVID-19 on the UK Book Consumer, suggests that reading is up, but publishers are competing more than ever with other forms of entertainment. Popular fiction at the moment includes crime, thriller and adventure, general popular fiction, romance and sagas, and popular non-fiction includes cookery, puzzle and quizzing, gardening, DIY and health and fitness. So to give you some real examples, publishers are looking for lots of ways to meet the market at the moment. They might reissue a working from home business guide. They might rejacket and update a book about baking bread. They might add or correct the series information on a crime list, or rush out maths and English homeschooling titles. But none of these will work without excellent relevant data that allows customers to find the titles at the point that they need them most. And these three data elements will work hardest for you. And the great thing about these is they don't include a lot of work in-house. You don't have to rebrief a cover or print a new edition. You can just go in and make changes to these three areas: description, category codes, and keywords. Keywords in particular are really important because you can really flag up new areas of interest using keywords. If you're publishing a book about baking bread, or you're trying to rejuvenate the data in the backlist, make sure that you talk about ciabatta. Make sure that you mention pizza dough. I think everyone I know who's homeschooling has made pizza with their children. It's thinking about what the market is looking for right now and using these descriptive elements, keywords and category codes to really reach those people. So how does the BIC PDEA scheme help? The Publishing Data Excellence Award is an annual award scheme run by BIC and assessed by Nielsen. It measures the completeness and timeliness of data. Under the current scheme, there are three levels: BIC Excellence Plus, which is the top level, BIC Excellence, and BIC Basic. The scheme measures data completeness, so making sure that all the main data elements are complete by the time of publication, and also data timeliness, to make sure that all data elements are in place 16 weeks before publication. All members of the scheme receive monthly reports and charts from Nielsen, and that helps them keep on track of their data. You also get a really nice certificate, which helps to boost data importance in-house and also looks nice on the office wall, if we ever get that there. So this is where I get to show off a little bit. These summaries are produced, I believe, every couple of months by BIC and show the current accreditation of all publishers in the scheme. I work with Hodder & Stoughton, Quercus, Headline and Jessica Kingsley, for example, all of which have BIC Excellence Plus, but they didn't always have it. And working with the stats and reports that Nielsen produce helped to identify where improvements in data need to be made. These are two of my favourite Nielsen graphs because they so obviously go in the right direction, but they also represent some really hard work in the individual divisions to improve data completeness and timeliness. Those of you already on the scheme may be quite used to seeing these graphs, but for those who are not, the black columns on these charts indicate the percentage of titles with complete data at the time of publication. And the blue columns indicate the percentage of titles with complete data 16 weeks ahead of publication. So you can see that month by month, we managed to improve the number of titles on these lists that had complete data early. On the left-hand side, you can see we started at about 50% of titles being ready 4 months before pub, and we slowly climbed that up to 80%. And remember that data ready early means 25% more sales, so it's always worth the effort commercially to get these figures up. For BIC Excellence Plus, the top award, 80% of editions need to be complete at publication, and 60% need to be ready 16 weeks ahead. Alongside the charts, you also get a breakdown by imprint, which shows which ones are missing the mark more than others. This is particularly helpful following imprint acquisitions or to show the types of book, for example, a cookery list that might be struggling to meet the target. Detailed reports are also included, and they list each ISBN and the data gaps if you want a deep dive into where you might be failing. So how do the reports work in practice? Here are a couple of examples where Nielsen reports and their stats have helped us to identify problems quickly and to fix them. So number one of our divisions, which typically has really good stats, suddenly dropped down. And the Nielsen reports helped us to quickly identify that it was one imprint in particular, and this happened to be a newly acquired imprint. We then ran internal reports of all key data for that imprint to show where the gaps were. And this report identified that there were a group of backlist titles that had no cover image. And further investigation showed that it was actually a migration error that could quite easily be fixed. Within a month or two, the percentage of complete data across the division had recovered. And the second example, the Nielsen report showed us that titles in this list were often failing on dimensions, and we couldn't work out why. We ran an internal report listing all formats for that list, but they all had one. But lots of them had the same format description, which was other, and in fact, that format description doesn't drop in dimensions. So changing our internal practice to ensure that titles set up with this format also had dimensions manually added solved the problem. So you can see from the cleansing examples that it's not just the Nielsen reports that contribute to good data. Internal reports and processes are crucial too. We have in-house reports that we run monthly to identify gaps ahead of time. This is particularly important for your timeliness stats, because if you're waiting for the Nielsen reports, it doesn't give you as much time to fix the issues. So we run monthly reports from our bibliographic system, which is Biblio3 for us, but I know other publishers use different systems, and review data at fixed points, namely 2 and 6 months pre-pub, to ensure that we have as much in place as possible. Covers are notoriously difficult to get earlier, and we've used holding covers, as many publishers have, to get around this where necessary. And the evidence suggests that even a holding cover will generate pre-orders where a blank image won't. We also do retailer checks at 2 and 6 months pre-pub. Although editors are checking their titles all the time, we find that these fixed points help to catch anything that you've missed. We also encourage editors to check all devices. A book can look quite different on your phone or iPad, and most books are now bought this way, so you should always check what your titles look like on these devices as well as your PC. We've also introduced post-publication checks. We run internal reports to check descriptions, reviews, and keywords 6 and 12 months post-publication. Again, editors should be checking their backlist regularly, but we found that these fixed points ensure that the data is kept fresh. And then finally, we have metadata best practice guidelines, as I'm sure all publishers do. And it's really important to keep these up to date and making sure that all new starters have a copy. So a quick note about the refreshed PDA scheme. Why are they changing it? The scheme is being simplified so that members are awarded bronze, silver and gold. All product formats, including print, digital and audio, will be assessed as one. And there are some new data elements that have been added to keep up with changing industry requirements. So for example, theme and category codes are mandatory for all levels. Use of Onyx 3, including ebook accessibility data and adult content warnings, are all necessary for gold accreditation. And there are some quality elements that are being included too, and these are still being checked, but they might, for example, include nonsensical dimensions, so something that measures 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. When is it happening? First applications will be welcome for 2021, and all organisations, including those accredited on the PDEA scheme, will need to submit an application. So, to conclude, great title metadata has complete and accurate basic elements. It has complete and rich descriptive data. It's ready early, at least 4 months before pub, but you should aim for 6 or more. Has regularly reviewed and updated dynamic data pre and post publication. And how do you achieve this? You do it by using the support available. The BIC PDAA scheme is a great help. By making metadata central to your in-house process. I can't stress this enough. I think some of the hardest work we've done is right at the beginning of the process to get those reports going and those processes in place. But once they're there, publishers then run with them and you'll find that their data is consistently good. And to resolve data issues quickly, also really key. I think that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening. I believe we're taking questions at the end, so back to Elena Marie.
Thanks, Cecilia. So our next, bear with me. So our next presenter is Graham Bell, the Executive Director of EDItEUR. Over to you, Graham.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena, and thank you also to Cecilia, our first speaker. I hope you can see my screen now. It should say something along the lines of keeping your metadata up to date. And this is something that Cecilia touched on, but for most of Cecilia's talk, there was no detail about how you would do this, and that's what I've been asked to cover. So, first of all, why should you trust me? I've been around in book publishing for 20 years or so. I'm executive director of the EDItEUR, which is a standards organization that works very closely with BIC, with BISG, with other very similar organizations around the world. And we're responsible for developing a number of the standards that Cecilia touched on that are used to transmit your metadata from your publishing company to your various supply chain partners. And importantly, as far as this talk goes, they're used to keep that data up to date as well. Why do you need to keep it up to date? Well, Cecilia touched on very importantly, on the commercial aspects of that. Up-to-date metadata, complete metadata, metadata that's delivered to the market at the right time when people need it. But that metadata is never finished. It's never final. It is always subject to change. And that's certainly true in the pre-publication period. I think everybody can understand that. The working title that the author submits to the publisher quite often isn't the title that ends up on the book. You may decide to publish the book in a slightly different format, or you may decide to change the pub date. All of these things can change in the pre-publication period. And whilst the aim, as Cecilia suggests, is to get your data out there as early as possible and to focus on getting it out there at least 4 months in advance of publication to give people a chance to pre-order, to build a bit of buzz, as Cecilia said. But that metadata continues to change, not only in the period between 16 weeks before pub and publication itself. Things do change at the last minute, and everybody understands that. But also, there's key metadata fields that continue to change even after publication. They change throughout the product's life. Now, Cecilia mentioned, for example, changing marketing collateral. You may, for example, want to revise your thema subject codes relatively frequently to make sure that you're hitting the right ones, to make sure if some new thing comes along that your book touches on, that you highlight this in the metadata. Keeping that marketing collateral fresh, up to date, whilst at the same time also making sure it's correct. I think everybody again understands that. But there's a few other things that change and change continually throughout the product's life. One of them is links to other products. So one of the things that wholesalers and distributors and retailers often complain about to BIC and to EDItEUR is that publishers don't put in enough of these links. Making sure you link from this edition to the previous edition. Making sure you update your old data for the previous edition to link to this newer one. Making sure you link between the hardback and the paperback and the ebook. To make sure that at retail level, customers can be assured that they're aware of all the different versions of the book. They don't necessarily only want to buy the paperback. There may be collectors who would be very happy to buy the hardback. There would be people who'd prefer to have it on ebook, and making sure they can switch easily from one to the other when they're purchasing online is enabled by these links that you provide to other products. And of course, distribution details, things like price and availability. As publishers have realized that tweaking the price helps with ebook distribution and ebook sales, this is increasingly also true with physical books, although the latency in the supply chain makes it a little more difficult. But we've all recently had a change in the VAT details for ebook, and there again, you want to make sure that the price details available in your metadata are kept up to date. That data supply chain absolutely relies upon the ability to update your data at any time throughout the product's life cycle. And then right at the end of that life cycle, you have, of course, got the I want to make this book out of print update as well. Now, there's different sorts of metadata, of course. Cecilia mentioned the basic product metadata, the richer marketing collateral, and the distribution details, which suppliers can a retailer purchase from, is also key. And this is generally distributed in your Onyx for books. I'm sure most of you on the call will be using Onyx to distribute your metadata. But of course, those ongoing changes, the price and availability, might be changed in a number of other ways too. You can change your price and availability using Onyx. And that's when those price and availability updates normally come from the publisher. But there are other methods as well. And in the UK, there is one that is predominant, I guess, and that's Tradecom EDI messaging. Mostly this is handled by your distributor. But there are others as well. BIC Realtime, which is based in part on Onyx, based in part on EDItEUR from EDItEUR. That's also another method that you might use for updating your price and availability. Some of these methods work by pushing your data out, by sending your data from the publisher or from the distributor to the rest of the market. Other methods work by pulling. The retailer or the wholesaler requests an update and gets sent that update as and when they request it. That push or pull, the choice between using Onyx or Tradecom or BIC Realtime, they all have an overlap. You can do different things using different methods, and you need to ensure that you have a clear strategy. Which method are you going to use to avoid contradictions? Because there will, almost without doubt, be contradictions in your internal data. And by not having a clear strategy about how this data is updated to the rest of the supply chain, then you will exacerbate those contradictions and make your data more difficult to use. Your strategy will obviously include reducing those internal contradictions, but you can also and should also reduce contradictions through very careful system integration. Different systems within the publishing company, different systems within the distribution organizations. Possibly you might think about keeping a very strict separation of methods. It's entirely possible, for example, to use Onyx for books in the pre-publication period, and maybe until just after publication, and then switching to Tradecom's EDI messaging to update price and availability in the post-publication period. But you need to have this clear strategy and be very aware of what you can update using which method. So, for example, with Onyx, you can update pretty much everything, but with Tradecom's EDI messaging, you can really only update the price and availability and one or two other things. Let's have a look at those other methods in some more detail. Tradecom's first. Now, this is an EDI messaging system. It's somewhat similar to a global system called EDIFACT. And most Tradecom's messages are actually business messages. They're orders, order acknowledgements, invoices, shipping notices, goods received notices, credit notices, and the like. These are all transactional messages. They represent individual business transactions. Now, within the Tradecom's family, there's a couple of exceptions. And the exception we're talking about here is a thing called the price and availability update. Standard Tradecom's message that allows you to update pretty much only the basic price and whether or not this product is available in the market. Now, Tradecom's is barely changed in the last 2 decades, so it's actually quite an old-fashioned sort of message. You perhaps wouldn't recommend it for new implementations, but it's very widely used, the most widely used without doubt, of the standards that we'll talk about today. Let's have a look at what a trader comms message looks like. It looks like this. It looks like gibberish, frankly, and it's very hard to understand when you look at it like that. I'll introduce some color coding. Frankly, it doesn't help much. So let's divide the message up into its smaller chunks. And it's not obvious even like this, but the message is built up of kind of headers that give basic information about who it's from, and then various little updates, and then a trailer that says, how many updates have I done? Just so you can check that the message is complete. Let's focus on just one part of the message, and this is the part that does the price and availability update. PVU inf, you can see there, that's the name of the message. And you can see this particular one is an amendment. But that amendment also has a date to say that amendment doesn't happen on the day this message is sent. It's actually a warning that the change will take place on the 1st of June. The change involves this particular book with that ISBN. And the change is that this book is currently reprinting. It's expected to be available on the 1st of June. And you can see that date where it says 20/06/21. So the reprinting will make it available on the 21st of June. And also there's a change to the price. The price is going to be £17.95. And just for confirmation, because this is a book, it's 0 rated for VAT purposes. So that's the update, and sending that out to, say, from your distributor to Nielsen, for example, would allow Nielsen to ensure that that change of price is reflected on their database. So that's one method of sending the data out. The second message will be Onyx. Now, many of you will be very familiar with Onyx. It's a catalog message. You send it to many of your supply chain partners, and it carries the full range of metadata. It's basic bibliographic metadata, it's collateral material, it's supply chain information like suppliers and markets and prices and availabilities. And you can update any part of this data, including price and availability, at any time in the life cycle by simply sending an Onyx message out. And of course, there's a danger that if you don't keep your prices up to date, your trader comms message might say the price of this book has risen from $15.99 to $17.99, but your Onyx continues to include the old price. And that can be dangerous because an update of Onyx might be triggered by, for example, some new keywords that have nothing to do with price. But that Onyx update will include the old price and contradict the trader comms update that you've just sent. Now in Onyx 2.1, some of you will be familiar with a special little version of Onyx 2.1, a subset of the main message that only includes basic price and availability information. In Onyx 3, which we'll focus on in a moment, it's more sophisticated. There's a message structure that allows you to send smaller messages. They're called block updates. And in a way, you're only sending the data that has changed. So when you're sending an Onyx update, all the time you're choosing between one of three strategies. First of all, a full update. Send all of your data. Frankly, you'd only do this once or twice a year because occasionally some errors build up and a full update gets rid of those errors. The normal method of updating is to send delta updates. You resend all data for all the products where any data has changed. So if a subject category changes, you resend all of the data, including the price and availability. If the author's name was spelt wrong and you correct it, then you send all the data. If the price or the availability has changed, you send all the data, including all that marketing collateral, including all the bibliographic information, even though it hasn't changed. Generally, publishers send these delta updates at least weekly for forthcoming and active products. In Onyx 3, you have this new facility called block updates, which allows you to resend only the data that has changed. More correctly, you actually send some data where there's a change somewhere in that data. But it means that if the price and availability changes, you don't need to send the bibliographic or marketing information, and vice versa. There's a lot less redundant processing for recipients, which is slightly odd because actually very few recipients have so far implemented this. These are the blocks, the 7 blocks plus a sort of informal block 0 that identifies the product. So you've got your product, you've got your basic product description, marketing material, promotional events, chapter level metadata, sales rights and pub dates, links to other products, markets, suppliers and prices. And each of those can be updated independently. Let's have a look. This is a block update in Onyx. When you look at it, first of all, it looks very familiar. If you're at all familiar with Onyx, then this will look perfectly normal until you study it in detail. On the third line, notification typo 4 means the product identifies which book you are updating, and then there is a product supply. That's block 6. There is no block 1 or 2 or 7 or 3 or 4 or 5. This is just a block update of the material in block 6. And there we have a supplier. And if I move down a bit, we have information about the fact the book is reprinting, that the availability is expected to be on the 21st of June. The price at that point will be $17.95, and it's 0 rated for VAT. The same information. Now, Onyx is a little more easy to understand when you see it on screen. But there we have the full Onyx block update. Finally, we have BIC Realtime. Onyx, trading comms, they're push methods. They're advertising the prices that are available to everybody. BIC Realtime provides a pull method. Metadata is delivered in response to a specific request. And like trader comms, most real-time messages are orders and acknowledgements and so on. But there is this exception, the product metadata API, actually 2 of them. One requests a full Onyx record to be sent. Another requests a price and availability update to be sent. They look similar, but they're not the same as conventional Onyx or EDItEUR messages. Here's a real-time example. This is a request sent, for example, by a retailer or a wholesaler to the distributor that says, send me a price and availability information that is current, that is right now. This is not an update. This is a request for whatever information is current, even if it's been unchanged for 6 months. The message identifies who's asking, the account identifier, who they're asking it of, the supplier identifier, and then the product. That's the ID value in product identifier towards the bottom of the screen. And in this case, it's actually also saying, well, I'm probably going to buy 6. So if there's special discounts for 6 copies, send that to me as well. You can also send the same request in a rather more compressed format. The response would look like this. And again, it's a relatively simple XML structure. It says the sender, it says the account identifier, it references the original request. That reference date time, a little below the middle of the screen, is actually the sent time of the request. And you'll see at the top, issue date time, that gives the time of the response. Towards the bottom of the screen, we have the information that was requested for this ISBN. And if I move the screen up slightly, you can see there that there's availability, code 21, it's reprinting, and the price, $17.95, 0 rated for VAT. Of course, this is real time, so it's always current, and you don't necessarily need a price. So to summarize, keeping your metadata up to date, as Cecilia suggested, is commercially valuable. This applies to all different parts of the metadata and all throughout the product lifecycle. And I would say that retailers and wholesalers should probably expect more frequent post-publication updates in the future. There are multiple methods, and you need to coordinate quite carefully. Get to know what your distributors are doing on your behalf, as well as understanding how the data flows within your own systems and how it gets sent out to everybody. Make sure you're not introducing contradictory information into the supply chain. That's all I want to say today. Thank you very much. There's a couple of slides which just have URLs on them, so that if you want more detail, you can go to the right source. Thank you, Elena.
Thanks, Graham. So our third and final speaker for today is Clive Herbert, Head of Professional Services at Nielsen Book. Over to you, Clive.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see my screen.
The screen isn't on at the moment, Clive, sorry.
Okay. Apologies. Can you see it now?
Indeed we can.
Thank you for confirming. Hello, everybody. My name is Clive Herbert, and I'm the Head of Professional Services at Nielsen. I've worked at Nielsen for about 18 years, and for most of that time, I've been supporting and guiding publishers with and identifying ways in which they can improve their metadata and therefore their sales. What I'm going to talk today about, the focus of my presentation will be around price and availability. We'll be looking at how Nielsen collects and validates data, and then we're going to highlight a few core issues and errors. First of all, I thought it would be useful to just talk about where Nielsen are with their services. So firstly, data is still being collected 24/7 and loaded to our systems. We continue to supply data to our downstream customers as normal. So if they were taking a certain service at a certain frequency, they are still receiving that data. And obviously that is important in terms of we are asking you to keep your metadata updated. So it is important that those updates actually get down to the customer. Our transactional services network, so for example, teleordering and PubEasy, are all up and working as normal. Over the lockdown period, of course, the amount of traffic across those systems has dramatically decreased, but they are there, ready and waiting for when the trade picks up again. All of our help desks are open to provide help and guidance to publishers. So our service support team, publisher help desk, and the ISBN agency. And I've just put the email addresses of the first two down there in case you need to contact us. The ISBN store is available for ISBN allocations. Unfortunately, we have had to suspend our manual process because our offices are closed. So currently, this is the only way you can get an allocation of ISBNs. And to reiterate, we are here, we're working from home, but we are supporting all of our support desks and help desks normally. Graham's presentation, of course, focused on Onyx, and indeed my own presentation has more than an element of Onyx. But I just wanted to remind people that it isn't only Onyx that we receive data through. We have EDI feeds from all main UK distributors, and we get EDI feeds from other countries, so for example, Australia. We now have over 500 inbound Onyx feeds, and we also have our own title editor portal for small and medium-sized publishers, and that currently has over 23,000 users. If our publisher is unable to provide an Onyx message, which of course is our preference, there are other developed formats that we can develop with them for the supply of metadata. So for instance, delimited and .csv. So what do we do with price and availability data when it comes in? Well, there are a number of validation rules that we do apply to it. So firstly, we check for the presence of some kind of availability status or publication status or market status. We validate the codes, make sure that they are correct. We check that the prices are only numeric, so they don't have any spaces or currency symbols. We also check that the dates are valid. We do get incorrect ones come through. And we check that if the availability code or the product availability is used, it should be accompanied by an expected availability tape. So we check for the presence of that. If you are using the BIC discount code scheme, we will check that that's been correctly sent. And for some feeds, we run validation on the tax composite if sent to ensure that the values are correctly calculated. Cecilia outlined very eloquently the benefits of making sure your data is correct and up to date. So I thought I'd muse on the issues and impacts caused by poor data. Retailers base their buying decisions on the data that you supply. So if the data is incorrect or out of date, the quality of those decisions is obviously diminished. One of the key problems is where the availability is incorrectly stated. So the customer and the retailer, when the order isn't fulfilled for the customer and the retailer on the date that it's expected, and that disappoints both. The other thing you want to do is make sure that there is confidence and no uncertainty in your data. Because if you have uncertainty and lack of confidence, and retailers have lack of confidence in your data, they will obviously, through their experience, determine the confidence and the value they place on the information you supply. So if they don't have confidence in it, they may, for example, make a statement of availability that is longer than the actual availability is, because they are unsure of whether the product will be delivered in time. It's important to maintain the product record to the end of its life. We do have a number of products every year on our database which should be now unavailable and out of print, but either, for example, through our title editor portal, the publisher forgets to make that important update, or sometimes when we receive data electronically, when a publication is made out of print and unavailable, it is actually removed from the P&A update before the final message is sent. So it's important to maintain the data right up until the end of the life cycle of the product. There are two key areas going on right now that we need you to provide updates for. So firstly, in good news for the trade, the government brought forwards the change in VAT on ebooks from standard rate to zero rate. Now we have between 4 and 5 million ebook records on our database, and we ask you that if you have provided ebook product records to us, that you update them as soon as you can. Obviously, you need to change the VAT, but just doing that in some cases will leave you with very strange price points. So we do recommend that people go back and have a look at the price overall, rather than just removing the VAT in isolation. And I'm aware that many publishers are taking this opportunity to look at the price points across all of their ebooks. Due to the pandemic and the lockdown, many publishers have been delaying their publication dates. What we say is, what we ask you to do is remember, it's not just the publication date that needs to be updated, but also things like the availability date and ship dates will all need to be updated too. And a reminder that that you need to provide an update for every territory that you supply. So for example, you may have decided to delay your publication date in the UK, but other countries like Australia and New Zealand are ahead of us coming out of lockdown. So be specific about the territories that those changes in publication date apply to. Going back to Onyx, these are the four most common pricing errors we receive. So the tax breakdown's not calculating correctly. So if the price is supplied inclusive of tax, and therefore is an RRP, the tax amount and the tax amount are being sent, these two fields should add up to the RRP. We often see errors here where the sum of the two do not equal the RRP price. Number two, taxable amount, the same as the RRP when the product has a standard rate tax. So therefore, if your price applied is inclusive of tax, e.g. an RRP, and the product attracts standard rate VAT, the tax amount should not be the same as the RRP. Thirdly, zero price is sent. So if the product is free of charge, it should be sent with an unpriced item code 01. Instead of a price composite, it should not be sent with a price of 0.00 or any other combination. And finally, the availability code and product availability conflicting with the availability date. So in summary, Nielsen is processing data normally. Even in lockdown, the trade thrives on accurate, high-quality data, as Cecilia has already indicated, doubly so when we're talking about selling through online retail environments. Please update your ebook prices with us if you haven't done so already. Update the message fully when delaying your publication dates. And as the theme of this presentation is, please maintain your data. Thank you for listening. I'll now pass you back to Alana Marie.
Thanks, Clive. So we now have a little time for questions and would like to open the floor to our attendees. If you have a question, please either type your question into the chat box provided or unmute yourself in order to speak and let us know who you are, the organisation for which you work, and your question. And obviously, if it's intended for anyone in particular, do let us know that as well. Just checking the chat box, and I'm afraid there isn't anything at the moment. Don't be shy. Your question can be about anything to do with keeping metadata up to date. Anything that you've been wondering about at all.
Oh, hello, this is Fiona Green from Bloomsbury. I just had a question about keywords. In the academic division at the moment, we include a lot of keywords in terms of the table of contents and the description, but we're not currently actually populating a keyword field. And partly I think it's a question of how editors should approach it really, and making sure the correct information goes in there. So I wondered if you'd be able to direct me to any resources that I might be able to use to gain some more understanding about keywords ahead of reviewing it again internally.
I can have a go at answer that. Hello, that's a really good question. It's Cecilia speaking here.
Hi there.
I'm not aware of any particular guidelines online. I would say the more keywords, the better. I think you need to try and think about your market and who you're trying to get to. You need to think about key retailer sites and what those people would be searching for. And the great thing about keywords is they don't publish anywhere. They don't reach the market. They don't appear on retailer sites. So you can change them and amend them. There's been a lot of testing our end to see which ones work, which ones push titles up the rankings and which ones don't have any effect. But because they don't appear anywhere, you're not risking anything by adding them. And I would aim for at least 10 and preferably 20.
And is it okay to repeat things that are held elsewhere, or do they have to be unique?
It's fine to do that. It's not necessarily adding anything for you if that's the case. I cannot now remember whether description is searchable on websites. I don't think it always is. So if you've got things that are only in your description, it might be worth putting those into your keywords. The example I gave about if you've got a cookery book or you've got a book about a particular subject, make sure you include in your keywords all the key areas that you're covering, because it might be that one person who's searching for ciabatta who will find your book because of that keyword and wouldn't do if you just left it baking bread. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
I would have a play with it because you can't really do any harm. You can only sales.
And there is a very good bite, I think, about keywords, which is worth having a look at because it has some very good advice in there to help you.
You took the words out of my mouth, Clive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll look that up.
This is Graham. I'm not sure I heard Clive clearly enough. I think, Clive, you pointed to the big bite on keywords. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct, Graham.
That's very useful. I'm not going to say any more than that because I was involved with writing it. But there is also the BISG metadata guidelines on the use of keywords as well, and that's also definitely worth a read. That's available free of charge from the BISG website.
Okay.
I'd also,
it's a very good, it's a very good guide.
Yes, I would also echo what Cecilia said. Think about numbers of keywords in terms of 10 or 20 keywords. If you're producing 50 or 100 keywords, you're probably doing it wrong. And the number of keywords that can be accepted, or more specifically, the number of characters that can be accepted by, for example, Amazon and other similar retailers is quite low. I see metadata with 500 or even 750 characters in the keywords field, and they actually only accept about 250 characters.
Thanks, Graham.
So too many keywords and you're wasting your time.
Okay, thank you.
So we have another question here for Cecilia from Adam Virtual at Sage, and he says, what sort of things are you looking at when checking titles on different devices?
That's another question. If I was the editor of that title, I would be checking that the cover is right and present on all devices. I would be checking what the customer sees when they log in and look at that title from that device. So is the description clear? Is the important bit of your description lost on the iPhone because it doesn't show you that whole screen? Have you made your first 2 lines as punchy as possible? Because especially when you're buying on a phone, customers are doing it quickly and they're making decisions very quickly. So you need to make it as easy as possible for them. I think that making sure that your key message is what the customer sees on whatever device that they're opening as easily as possible. That would be my advice. And I think you will know what I mean if you take any title in your list and just look at the differences between a PC, a tablet and a phone. They do look different. They do seem to highlight different things. They put reviews in a slightly different order, for example. So I would just have a look and then you'll see the differences.
Thanks, Cecilia. I think we've now run out of time for questions, so thank you all for your questions. I'd like to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to our speakers on behalf of everyone in attendance. Thank you, Cecilia, Graham and Clive, for your fantastic presentations. I'll put my tongue back in. To you, our attendees, I'd like to say thank you for attending and please do stay in touch. You can find out more about BIC and the work that we do via the BIC website at www.bic.org.uk or by joining our mailing list. If you work for a non-member organisation and you'd like to find out more about joining BIC and the benefits involved, then do get in touch as well. We'll make the presentation slideshow for this event available on our website shortly, and a recording of the whole event will be put on the BIC YouTube channel very soon. We hope to see you at another BIC event in the near future, but in the meantime, take care.